We're back on the Hugh Hewitt radio program. I'm guest host Kurt Schlichter, broadcasting live from the Relief Factor studio in beautiful Southern California at Dark 30. Well, it's Dark 30 here, but I think it's about high noon out in Berlin, where our ambassador, Rick Grenell, is protecting American interests. Ambassador Grenell, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Kurt, thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you representing our country overseas, but I miss you. You're from my town in the South Bay. I see it like the Trader Joe's.
Just hearing the fact that you're saying that you're broadcasting from Southern California makes me very homesick for the weather, at least. I'm looking at the Brandenburg Gate and the Bundestag, and it's a cold, a little bit cloudy day here in Berlin.
Well, you don't have to tell me about Germany. I lived there for about 2 or 3 years during the Cold War as a young lieutenant, which always makes it fun when our liberal friends explain to me how, you conservatives are Putin's puppet, and I was literally in the Cold War. That's always a lot of fun. Explaining things is one of the jobs you do as an ambassador to our allies in Germany. How are you explaining this bizarre impeachment circus that's happening here?
I have to be honest with you. I have not gotten a question about it ever.
Really?
I've been here. Not a single person has asked me. Now, it's probably going to immediately change because I said that, and people will just do it for political reasons. But it is not an issue that's brought up at all.
Do you think it's because the Europeans consider it sort of politics as usual in America, or it just doesn't register? Why do you think? Because if you're here, it's 24/7.
I think the media in Europe, at least, are focused on real substantive issues of what's going on. I mean, there's a whole bunch going on in the world, and it's just not an issue that comes up. I get asked about Nord Stream 2. I get asked about car tariffs. I get asked about medical devices. I get asked about the current German defense minister came out with an idea to help do something in Europe. I mean, in Syria with the Europeans, have the Europeans step up a little bit more in Syria. That's being debated. So there's a whole bunch of issues of substance that I think that we talk about.
One of the main, ideas of the kind of the populist movement that brought President Trump to power in the United States was a concern that the United States was carrying too much of its burden. And you mentioned Nord Stream 2, which is a gas pipeline from Russia into Europe, which would give Putin more leverage over our allies. You mentioned assisting us in Syria. The president has brought up the fact that a number of European countries have refused to take back their own citizens who went to join ISIS. How has the relationship between the United States and our European allies changed since the Trump administration took power? Have they been able? Are they understanding this populist shift in the United States? Because it goes against American foreign policy for the last 30 years.
Sure, and I think it's happening here in Europe as well. This is a complex issue, but what I would say is that there's a difference between the German people, the German government, and the German business community. Certainly the German business community understands what's happening in the United States. They want to be a part of the Trump economy. I hear constantly that European and German businesses, in particular CEOs, tell me they want to move to the United States or expand their businesses there. Foreign direct investment in the United States is increasing. I think when it comes to the German people, they recognize that America has sacrificed for them. We've got a lot of German Americans throughout the Midwest that are committed to the relationship. I think the German people are hardworking. They love America. They understand the sacrifices that were made, whether it's the Berlin airdrop or the 30th anniversary of the fall of the wall, which is coming up next week. The German people and the American people, I think, are very similar when it comes to viewing the world. I will say that the German government has enjoyed not being asked to pay the NATO obligations that that they're required and that they committed to make. In the last couple administrations, both Republican and Democrat administrations before President Trump, we had the same policy as asking the Germans to pay their 2% NATO obligation. We've had the same policy in the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration. The difference is that in the Trump administration, European countries have increased defense spending by $100 billion. That's no small change. And so when I get asked about the tough stance of the Trump administration or the tweets or the pushes that I make to ask them to pay their NATO obligation, to fulfill their obligation and their commitments, I always say, look, we've tried asking nicely, and you didn't increase defense spending, and so we've had to ask a little more poignantly, and that's working. We're starting to see the increases. Now, we're not there yet. The Germans are not at the 2%. There's a huge debate in Germany, and so we continue to push on that issue because we want to see them pay their 2% NATO obligation, but they have started to increase under the Trump administration.
Well, it's interesting that you seem to distinguish between the attitude of the German people with kind of the attitude of the German elite. Is the German and frankly the European elite still kind of baffled about this whole populist phenomenon embodied by Trump and to some extent existing within its own political culture?
Well, let me answer that by saying there's a party here that's in a coalition government with Chancellor Merkel's government, her party, the Christian Democrats. The Social Democrats, are in a coalition with Chancellor Merkel's party. And the Social Democrats are the ones who are resisting spending more money on defense. And they tell me pretty regularly, why would we want to buy an attack helicopter if we can buy a kindergarten program with our money? And so I get the focus from the Social Democrats in Germany that they have on domestic spending, but I tell them pretty bluntly, just be careful what you teach the American people, because if you teach the American people that we're supposed to just spend domestically, then that's going to be a problem for the Germans in the future. We have 52,000 total troops in Germany if you count rotational and temporary troops and the contractors. We have 34,000 active duty military personnel. So within that context, I think that there's a concern that if the Germans and the German government don't make a commitment that they follow through on the 2% obligation, that the Americans are going to follow them and spend more domestically.
Is it difficult to explain kind of the American populist notion that is sometimes articulated as, well, if Germany's not worth defending to Germans, why is it worth defending to Americans? And I ask that question as somebody who literally spent a couple years defending Germany.
Well, I think what you're hitting on is that we definitely have a problem of threat perception in Germany, and that's one of the issues that we constantly try to, at Embassy Berlin, try to focus on, is highlighting the threats so that everyday Germans and the German government understand that there are threats, because certainly we know that Russia is a threat, Iran is a threat, China is a threat. And so we just have to make sure that there is a threat perception that matches reality, because otherwise, if you do have 52,000 American military personnel in your country, there is a tendency to get comfortable with that, and it would make sense that you then don't have to spend as much on defense because you don't see the threat like those who are on top of the watchtower.
One of the big concerns about the German military is its operational readiness rate. Its armored vehicles, its helicopters, its ships, its jets. Some of the operational readiness rates have been just disastrous. We're 10, 15%. That effectively means, those weapon systems are completely unavailable. Has Have the Germans made effort to address that concern?
I think the first step to understand is that across the board, German media, German government, German military, there is an agreement, and it is known that the German military is not up to where it should be, that they have a deficit, that they don't have the capabilities, that they don't have enough equipment and hardware. And so we're happy that there is an agreement that they don't have the proper equipment. But what we now need is the political will to spend the money and the procurement process. That's the other part, is that we now have an issue in Germany where a lot of experts are saying, look, we're not able to spend the money that we're currently increasing in the German military budgets. But what we need to do is we need to get better at figuring out how to speed up the procurement and the process to purchase this equipment. And so I do think that we're in the very real throes of a change. But the frustrating thing for Americans is that, we're always impatient, and I think the Trump administration is even more impatient than the typical American, that we'd like to get this moving. It's been a commitment that the Germans made in 2014 to increase defense spending to 2%. That was a commitment of 10 years time. Take from 2014 to 2024 is what NATO said. Take 10 years and increase defense budgets to the 2%, and we're behind in Germany.
Well, it seems that German people are getting a little impatient too. Angela Merkel's party lost in a recent regional election. Are we going to see some changes there? We only have about 15 seconds left.
Yeah, I think all of Europe is under change. Brexit certainly has sent some powerful signals. Chancellor Merkel is coming to the end. She's announced that this is her last term. So, yeah, I think you're going to see changes throughout all of Europe.
Well, here in California, Ambassador Rick Grenell, we need to see some changes, too. There's a campaign to recall our governor, Gavin Newsom. I can think of one person who should come back here and be our governor. You. What do you think of that?
Well, I have a job that I am currently focused on, but I do love California.
I hope to see you back here soon. That's Ambassador Rick Grenell here on the Hugh Hewitt Radio program. I'm guest host Kurt Schlichter. We're going to be right back with David Drucker.